Hi, welcome to A Gray Barn Rising. I'm here with Bootsy, and I'm reading the poems this evening of the Chinese poet Yuan Mei, who lived from 1716 to 1797 in what is known as the Qing Dynasty in China. I'm also drinking a wonderful cup of Chinese tea, milk oolong, beautiful cup of oolong, milk oolong. If you've never had milk oolong, I highly recommend it. Yuan Mei is a fascinating poet, in large part because not only was he popular during his time, but he was also rather irreverent, and he questioned a lot of the norms. He really saw himself as a Buddhist, and in some ways a Taoist, but he questioned conventional Buddhism and conventional Taoism, and certainly some of the norms of the time. One of the things that Yuan Mei did that distinguished him was that he had a lot of female students, particularly in poetry, and he even made a point of publishing his female students. And he also questioned other norms, other rules of society. He also was very interested in cooking. One of the things that Yuan Mei did was he wrote a treatise on cooking, including several of his own recipes. There's a fabulous biography about him, and it's called Yuan Mei, 18th Century Chinese Poet, written by the eminent translator and scholar of Asian thought, Arthur Waley. This is one of the very best biographies of any poet that I have ever read. I highly recommend it. When this book came out, it was one of the few books about a major poet of China. Now there are others, but it was one of the very few biographies at the time. I want to read for you a back cover endorsement by the poet Kenneth Rexroth that expresses the same enthusiasm that I have for the book. Rexroth says, "I wish everyone who reads this review would go out and buy the book. I wish every American poet would read and ponder it long. The poems are beautiful, the biography is absorbing." And the biography indeed is absorbing, and Arthur Waley intermingles excerpts from the poetry of Yuan Mei here as well. I want to read sort of a couple of poems from him, and I want to begin with a translation by Jonathan Chaves. Jonathan Chaves is a renowned translator. This is a major anthology that he edited and translated entitled The Columbia Book of Later Chinese Poetry. I want to begin with this poem, On the Way to Paling. From Lake Tungting we travel west to the shrine of the goddess. Here to comfort weary travelers are women with painted brows. The mountain town is desolate. Shops close at early hours. The fortress towers light, still far. We're late to moor our boat. The dialect here I do not speak. I'll hire interpreters. Such strange birds. I don't know their names, ashamed as a scholar of the odes. How rare to find a boatman who understands my heart. Each time I open the cabin window, there's a branch of blossom on shore. The ending of that poem is so lovely. It suggests a transparency between what's inside his cabin and the outside world. There's also that wonderful line of self-deprecation in the poem where he says, I don't know the names of animals, and he's ashamed as a scholar of the odes. There was a Confucian text that said that any person of learning really needed to know the names of animals. I love that sense of self-deprecation in a Yuan Mei poem. Fog at Liang Sing. No rain, and yet my saddle is damp. And so I know we're traveling in fog. Morning blossoms, hard to tell their colors. River water, only hear the sound. The man beside me seems miles away. All day the sky is as before the dawn. The road ahead has always been a dream. Why insist on seeing it all clear? What's beautiful about that poem, one of the things that's beautiful about that poem is the literal fog, but also the metaphorical fog of the human condition and the delusion we're in as human beings. He addresses that in certainly a Buddhist fashion, the fog of our daily lives as well. So those are a couple of Jonathan Chave's translations. I'd like to turn now to a translation by J.P. Seton with a title very appropriate to the irreverence, sometimes irreverence of Yuan Mei, I Don't Bow to Buddhas. This is a book from Copper Canyon Press. J.P. Seton was actually born in Lafayette, Indiana in 1941. So I think I'll begin, I have a lot of poems marked as I've been reading back through the poems of Yuan Mei. I doubt I'll be able to get to all of them, so I may give more of a free reading. I'll look at these and see which ones I want to read as my eye falls on the page. But I want to begin with this one. Returned from Yangzhou up the hill to view the snow, and it's in two parts. There and back, 10 days. The boat returned with the sun and the river. Now to view the snow, I'll go on up the mountain, lusting still for idleness. I won't go in the city. Snow petals brighten the moon's dark face. Freezing rain sings the spring's song. Overnight beside wild rapids, to sound the watches, a single swan. 2. If you don't climb 1,000 crags, how can you learn all things are empty? The mountain's head is white, and mine is too. December dies, the year runs out its string, as all things do. At the summit, one rude hut, the snow, this lonely body, and the wind. I lean on the rail, heart sudden struck. The moon rises from within great river, there. One page of a book, and I'm caught. Staying up, my wife suggests several times, enough is enough. Ivory tower suffering, my lady's perturbed. I've grown old and still just a schoolboy. There are several poems that Yuan Mei has about the power of reading and the power of literature. And also about poems late at night, located late at night, and his inability to sleep. This is entitled Sleepless. 1, then 2, the cocks begin to crow. 4th watch, 5th watch, sky not yet lit. The window just now catching dew, east sky turning white. A sick man's dreams are short as winter nights are long. The lamp snuff lies on the table, my scuffle on the beams, head bowed to pillow, my eyes are wide open. I inverted that. My eyes are open wide. 40 years worth of things to forget. What an incredible closing. How does one deal with regret? He gets at that core truth, the essence of that in that poem. Alone. The water clock drips the 3rd watch, time runs out. Frost flowers on the whole broad earth, wind and the trees shiver. Ancient owl peers in at the door, then chuckles dryly as he leaves. And here, within, a single lamp and one old man sitting. Like many of his contemporaries and also the poets that he revered, he will take a moment and distill it and try to reach a deep insight. And often that insight is a transparency between his own consciousness and the outer world. Here's another poem entitled Sleepless. One rain and all the flowers gone. Third watch and all the music still, except what strikes my ear and stays my sleep. From a windy branch, the last drops fall. Autumn thoughts. Falling sun on empty mountains. Where'd it be good to go? Monkeys offer creeper. Maybe it's a sign. Lifelong wordless. That was Wei Ma's way. But I won't speak of that. It's just in search of yellow asters that I've come to see this monk. There are a lot of Chinese poems about visiting people, and they are often about that literally, visiting a person, but it's also metaphorical because of that transparency of visiting the essence of that person in one's own consciousness. They mean it on a literal level, but certainly the poem accretes and gathers a wider arc of meaning by virtue of that, again, thinning that membrane between the outer and the inner selves. Night thought. Midnight, sudden jerk awake. Wordless, heart still, sighs. Tonight's the frost's first fall. That's all. And I forgot to cover the houseplants. That's so beautiful where he gives us, he doesn't position himself as the great knower, the great arbiter of knowledge. But in that poem we feel a deep sense of knowing because he distills the moment to the everyday, the mundane. I imagine most of us have woken in the night and remembered, thought of the most mundane activity, mundane task, I should say, that we have forgotten to perform. And he says, and I forgot to cover the houseplants. That's what makes him so human. It's what moves me so much about Yuan Mei. Temple of the Bamboo Grove. Late I passed the temple of the Bamboo Grove. In slanting sun the corners of the walls sunk deep in shade. Windy lamp, the red, unsteady. Green, misty willows, deep and still. Few monks. Stone chimes are often silent. Many trees. Sunlight and shade, too. Ears catch a hint of Buddhist chanting. My horse's bells have a pure, clear tone. Beautiful juxtaposition between those last two lines, the Buddhist chanting and then the bells of his horse. Again, and it's a very Buddhist thought, of course, that the sacred is also embedded in the profane, that the sacred chanting is also something that should be there in one's daily life, the things that we often miss, like the chiming of the horse's bells. There's a little poem that mentions Yuan Mei, and viewers of this program certainly know how much I adore the poetry of Yuan Mei, the Chinese Tang Dynasty poet. It's entitled Mountain Wandering. Sunlit, mountains stand straight up. Mountains sink in rain. Rising, I like sunlight best. For roaming, give me shade. Here's the sort of pale blue, deep green place Yuan Mei might paint. There's no way to sing it. Yuan Mei was also a painter, he was also a musician. I love how he thinks about Yuan Wei's painting there. Yuan Wei's vision. They mock me for planting trees at my age. Let me give you just a couple more. 70 and still planting trees. Don't laugh at me, my friends. Of course I know I'm going to die. I also know I'm not dead yet. And let me give you a poem entitled Last Poem, Goodbye to My Garden. He was famed for tending to his garden. Was I no more than some fairy being, strange beast, from the Sutra of Ceylon, arisen and set free to play at Xiao Sang's summit garden? Did I not know that garden's guests of poems and lutes, wine and songs, would also hear the gong of time, the last drip drop of the water clock? My eye roams the towers and pavilions, and I know these lines are my farewell. This mountain full of birds will stay, forever wound and bound in its flowers. Long ago, an immortal chose to return to his home in the form of a crane, and was almost shot down by a lad with a sling. If I ever come back to this paradise, I'll remember to be careful. I mean, it's a deeply touching and intimate poem. And many of the Chinese poets wrote poems as a final farewell as they were leaving the body, near the time they left the body. But his character, Yuan Mei's characteristic humor emerges in that poem too. I'll remember to be careful. So I read the poems of Yuan Mei. I also want to mention there's a Healthy Gathering in Waiting for the Unicorn. This is sort of a companion volume. This is edited by Irving Lowe and some others. Sort of a companion volume to Sunflower Splendor, which I've mentioned before, which I believe is the gold standard of anthologies. But this is a later period of Chinese poetry, and there's a healthy dose of Yuan Mei's poems in there as well. So I read from the Columbia Book of Later Chinese Poetry, translated by Jonathan Chaves, and also I Don't Bow to Buddhas, translated by JPC. I hope you seek out Yuan Mei's work. I think you can see it has a lot of breadth and a lot of depth. Thank you so much for joining Bootsy and me for another episode of A Great Barn Rising.